Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
Compared with various occupations in the human world, the advancement path of the zombie family is more than simple and clear. Difficulty has been reduced countless times. Even a lone wolf player, through his own efforts, can smoothly transfer from the living corpse of the basic rank all the way to the zombie lord of the lord rank that Kuan Yin Jing saw. Compared with the huge energy and time that human beings need to spend to change jobs, it is indeed willful. What Kuan Yin Jingting didn't know was, any kind of high-level occupation is the most precious inheritance of human duchies, kingdoms, empires or other forces, and naturally it will not be disclosed, and will not be allowed to be acquired by others. What about the undead camp? Su Mu is the supreme master. The professions of these undead camps were also created by him. Naturally, he will not set up many obstacles to hinder the growth of these undead camp players, as long as it is allowed by the rules of the game. He does not hesitate to give these players, who have joined his camp, the greatest convenience. With excitement, Kuan Yin opened the career template of Zombie Lord. The bonus of HP and 4-dimensional attribute growth is as powerful as ever. If one day in the future, he successfully advanced Zombie Lord, will get the 5th professional skill, Ghost Strike. Ghost Strike, active skill, instantly crosses a certain distance and appears in front of the enemy. At the same time, with the sharp claws full of death and darkness, it gives the enemy 5 times the heavy damage of normal attacks. A powerful attack skill. It is also a powerful displacement skill. That is to say, when the player advances to the advanced Zombie Lord, the biggest disadvantage of the slow speed of the zombie family can be greatly compensated. Spring-Eye Dragonfly is satisfied. From his point of view, there is really no dissatisfaction with acquiring such a powerful profession. Not just 473 Spring-Eye Dragonflies of the more than 40,000 players shrouded in black mist, except for a very few who were unwilling to join the undead camp. They chose to refuse, and then were eroded to death. All the remaining players chose to agree. Then, human players of various professions were gradually replaced by 2 completely different undead players. The zombie family, tall, with blue faces and fangs, constantly exudes a ferocious and tyrannical atmosphere. The corpse witch clan, with dry body, covered with gray robes, 2 red lights flashing under the hood, and the exposed half of the chin, let them exude a mysterious and powerful atmosphere. From the looks of it, there's nothing wrong with it. These players adapt quickly to their new look and are excited. In terms of attributes and skills, there is no problem. Even if some players don't know the benefits of switching to the undead profession, they gradually understand the power of the zombie clan and the corpse witch clan under the popular science of the surrounding players. Perhaps the hardest is the agile occupations such as hunters, assassins, and archers. They will continue to struggle for some time to come before Su Mu creates a new agility to give them a transfer to the undead profession. Battlefield Center. Su Mu opened his faction panel at this time. On his faction panel, in addition to himself, in addition to Agnes and Carola, countless names have appeared. In the upper right corner of the faction panel, a number appeared, 38,971. This is the number of players who joined the undead camp this time around. Among them, more than 27,000 players have been transferred to the zombie family, and more than 11,000 players have been transferred to the corpse witch family. With nearly 40,000 undead players, Suma's undead camp development plan has successfully completed the first step. Next, he opened the mission editing system. Open the undead camp and transform undead players. The first purpose is naturally to cut leaks, harvest experience points from these many undead camp players, and improve their level, but this step is not urgent. The second purpose is to drive the players, and let the players do things that are inconvenient for them to do instead of themselves. For example, find clues to other legendary rank undead, for example, find clues to the skull note and death note, etc. Players are players after all. As long as they're big enough interests, the entire game world has no places they can't reach, no clues they can't find, and no goals they can't complete. Perhaps it's just that less than 40,000 undead players can't do it. 19. And what about the millions of players spread across the Anduin continent? Smile. Su Mu starts editing the mission on the mission editing system. Legendary main quest, Book of the Dead. Mission description. According to legend, there are 4 books of the undead in Anduin continent, namely Lich Note, Ghost Note, Skull Note and Death Note. These 4 books of the undead hide the biggest secret of the undead family. Today, the leader of the undead camp, the King of Bones, hopes to get these 4 books of the undead. As a member of the undead camp, you should dedicate your strength. Quest objective: find 4 books of the dead and dedicate them to the King of Bones. Or find clues to the 4 books of the dead and inform the King of Bones. Quest rewards: 1. Find one of the 4 books of the dead, You can ask the King of Bones to create an exclusive epic job template for him. You can get 1 legendary equipment, 2 epic equipment and 10 dark gold equipment. This reward can be exchanged for the legendary occupation inheritance of non-undead tribe too. If you find a clue to one of the 4 books of the dead, you can ask the King of Bones to create an exclusive lord occupation template for him, and you can get an epic equipment, 2 pieces of dark gold equipment, and 10 pieces of gold equipment. This reward can be exchanged for epic occupation inheritance of non-undead race. Epic main quest, Lord of the Undead. Mission description: as the leader of the undead camp, the King of Bones is preparing to unify the undead race in the Anduin continent. As a member of the undead camp, you should dedicate your strength to the unification of the undead clan. Mission objective: find clues and locations where the legendary undead may exist. Quest reward: for every clue and location of the existence of the legendary undead, you can get 1 piece of epic equipment, 2 pieces of dark gold equipment, and 10 pieces of gold equipment. The reward can be exchanged for the epic occupation inheritance of non-undead tribes. Faction main quest, the rise of the undead clan. Mission description: the war between the dead and the living has never ended, and will never end. As a member of the dead, it is your duty to strengthen your race. Mission goal: use all means to strengthen the undead clan. Task reward: all the actions of the undead camp players that are beneficial to the growth of the undead family will generate contribution. When the total contribution reaches 1 million, the undead skill library will be opened. Every player of the undead camp can pass the experience points, can be exchanged for the corresponding skills at the King of Bones. When the total contribution reaches 10 million, the undead equipment library will be opened, and every player of the undead camp can exchange experience points for the exclusive undead equipment of this profession at the King of Bones. When the total number of contributions reaches 100 million, the main city of the undead will be opened. Every player of the undead camp can enter the main city of the undead through the corresponding teleportation array, and by residences, skills, equipment and other existences. 3 tasks. The first task is for players to help Sumu find the skull note and death note. The second task is to let the players help Sumu find clues and locations of the legendary undead, so that he can obtain a new legendary occupation template and fuse his own legendary occupation template. The first 2 tasks are practical goals. With the accumulation of previous wars, Suma's storage space has already accumulated a large number of equipment of various grades, even dozens of legendary equipment. These equipments are of no use to Sumu, but they are a huge asset to the players. Not to mention the temptation of career templates. In order to fully mobilize the enthusiasm of the players outside the undead camp are also drawn into this vigorous search. Sumu also specially indicated that the related inheritances of non-undead occupations can also be exchanged with the character of the players. I'm afraid no one can refuse. The third task is to simply draw a pie. In the first stage, the skill library is opened, that is, the skill store, prepared by Sumu for players, which not only enriches the skill system of undead players, but also allows Sumu to harvest a large amount of experience points. For the time being, Suma's skill arsenal isn't very large, but when he deliberately collects skills, is it not an easy thing to enrich the skill library? Corrode a few more heroes and read their memories more. The second stage, opening the equipment library. This is a bit troublesome. Sumu spends a lot of time collecting the corresponding lich, or transforming the undead blacksmith and undead alchemist, but it's just trouble. As long as he has the heart, he can still do it. The last stage, the main city of the undead. This is really a big cake for players. This is equivalent to telling the player that the undead camp is not only a promising camp, but also a camp that runs through the game. Where is the main city of the dead? What is inside? Every player in the undead camp will be curious, look forward to it, and work hard for it. When Sumu grows to a sufficient height, and has enough leisure to build such a main city, it will naturally open to players. The so-called faction contribution degree is just a concept fabricated by Sumu himself. How much the contribution is, naturally, Sumu has the final say. When to open the skill library, when to open the equipment library, and when to open the undead city in his thoughts. The appearance of the skill library makes up for the shortcoming of the undead camp players' scarcity of skills. The appearance of the equipment library makes up for the disadvantage that most of the equipment of the undead camp players cannot be used. The emergence of the main city of the undead has given all the players of the undead camp a sense of belonging and honor. One by one, perfectly closed. When this whole system is established, perhaps the undead camp will become a huge camp no less than the human camp. Or maybe, by that time, Sumu already possessed terrifying powers that rivaled the gods. Who knows? After completing the editing of these 3 tasks, Sumu smiled slightly, clicked on the faction panel, and selected all the players who had joined the Undead faction as the release target. Mind a move. These 3 main quests from the King of Bones sounded in the minds of nearly 40,000 Undead camp players. After handing out the newly edited task, Sumu left. The Anduin continent is huge and has many players. He still has a lot of places to go, transforming players into Undead camp players as much as possible, and letting as many Undead camp players spread out in this world as possible. Sumu is gone. The Undead players inside and outside of Brindo Castle completely exploded after a brief silence. F***K, F***K, F***K. Although the shock received today was big enough, when 3 consecutive system prompts sounded in my mind. After reading the 3 tasks released by the King of Bones, word by word, Chuanyan Jingting couldn't help but swear again. Legendary main quest, epic main quest, faction main quest. The next moment he joined the Undead camp, a series of 3 main quests appeared on his taskbar, and check out these main quest rewards. Exclusive epic occupation template, exclusive lord occupation template, legendary occupation template, epic occupation template, legendary equipment, epic equipment, dark gold equipment, undead skill library, undead armory, undead city. For a time, Kuan-Yin Dragonfly felt like he was hit by a gift bag. Players from the entire Anduin continent have received epic plot quests and legendary plot quests that are related to Sumu. The epic story mission is the invasion of the fortress city of Caesar's empire by Sumu, the King of Bones. The legendary story mission is the invasion of the capital of Caesar's empire by the King of Bones. Without exception, both of these massive plot missions ended in failure. Players didn't get any benefit either. Besides, those war plot missions triggered by the fire of war all over the continent are basically heroic plot missions, far from the level of epic plots and legendary plots. And now, an epic main quest, a legendary main quest, all lie in his taskbar. Not only is the reward extremely rich, the key is, these 2 quests are all unrelated to combat, and all are tasks of finding clues. If it is a battle plot, at the height of epic missions and legendary missions, it is basically difficult for current players to participate in it. Even if you forcibly participate in it, it is difficult to obtain benefits. Just like the 2 sieges of the King of Bones, but the task of finding clues is different. These 2 tasks have nothing to do with the player's strength. What they test is more about the player's luck, the player's connections, and the player's mining of existing information. That is to say, whether it is a top player like him who has stepped into the warrior rank, or the elite player with the largest number, the official player, or the apprentice player who has just entered the game, all have the possibility to complete the mission. Who doesn't want to get an epic career? Who doesn't want to get legendary gear, even if the obtained professional templates and legendary equipment are not suitable for you? As long as you sell them, you will get a huge fortune immediately. Not the coins in the game world, but the wealth of real money in the real world. A time, Spring-Eye Dragonfly was shocked. After the shock, Kuan-Yin Dragonfly first thought of how to get benefits through these 3 main quests. There is a small chance of directly completing these 3 tasks, but sometimes information is also a resource. It is obviously impossible to do these 3 tasks alone, judging from the performance of the surrounding players. They also received the 3 main quests, released by the King of Bones. Some of the players who participated in the battle for the Brindo Fortress were members of the adventure group like him, some were lone wolf players, and some were from game guilds. In this case, it is impossible to hide the opening of the Undead camp, and the release of the 3 main quests even. Soon these 2 news will spread among all players, so can only cooperate. Thinking of this, Kuan-Yin Dragonfly immediately went offline and returned to reality. From the human camp to the Undead camp, his chat channel is half useless. Even the faction is different. So many friends in the original chat channel are naturally unable to contact. But never mind, he has the contact information of the leader of a large game guild in reality. It is difficult to complete the first 2 main quests by himself, and the hundreds of players under his command alone. If you add a large game guild with more than 100,000 members, it will be different. It wasn't just the Spring-Eye Dragonfly who thought of this. When waking up from the shock of the release of the 3 main quests, a large number of players also made the same actions as Spring-Eye Dragonfly. Offline, back to reality. Then, they either went to the forum to post, or contacted their friends, or contacted the senior management of the game guild they belonged to. In short, in a very short period of time, the Undead camp was opened, the 3 main quests were released, and information about the 2 undead races, the zombie corpse, quickly spread among the players. After leaving Fort Brindo, Sumu continued on his way, appearing in battlefields or cities again and again. The black mist spreads out again and again, transforming a large number of aborigines into undead, and at the same time expanding the number of undead camp players once, twice, 5 times, plus. And with Suma's move, More and more countries and forces on the Anduin continent learned that the King of Bones had reappeared, and a new round of massacres began. There are also more and more players who have been transformed into players of the undead camp in the process. 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, 500,000. When more than 500,000 players joined the undead camp, and all received the 3 main quests released by Sumu, the official forum of Second World in the real world was detonated. Compared to the players in the entire Anduin continent, the 500,000 undead players are only about 1/10 of the total. Compared to the players in the entire game world, the players in the 500,000 undead camp are a drop in the bucket. But the King of Bones Sumu was originally the focus of countless players. Disappeared for half a year. When it reappears and the king returns, it leads to the opening of the undead camp, and 3 main quests one after another, which makes Sumu's popularity among players explode again. When most of the players are discussing the reappearance of the King of Bones and the opening of the undead camp, the remaining players will inevitably get involved. When the 3 main quests involve legendary equipment, epic equipment, legendary occupation and epic occupation, it is not just the more than 500,000 undead camp players who are involved. The forum has already circulated the job template information of the 2 undead races, zombies and witches, and screenshots of the detailed mission descriptions of the 3 main quests for the former. Most players just envy a wave, praise a wave of things for the latter. Every player in the Anduin continent can't wait to get involved, whether it's the undead camp, the human camp, or the camp of other races, because the mission statement is clearly written. The King of Bones not only has legendary equipment, epic equipment, and dark gold equipment, but also has the ability to create exclusive occupations for players of the undead camp, and also has legendary occupation templates and epic occupation templates for the living camp. That's right, these 3 main quests can only be accepted and completed by players of the undead camp. But that doesn't mean players from other factions can't get involved. A super game guild can completely sign a real legal agreement with a player of the undead camp. The super game guild assists the undead player to complete the main task, and the undead player trades the rewards obtained to the super game guild. 0. Ask for flowers. Anyway, there are real laws as constraints. The Super Game Guild is not afraid of the undead players taking the benefits, and the undead players are not afraid that the Super Game Guild will not give them the corresponding rewards after they get the corresponding rewards. Thus, who can stay out of it? Who doesn't want to get the legendary equipment, epic equipment, legendary occupation, epic occupation mentioned in the main quest? This was originally a part of Sumu's plan. 500,000 players from the undead camp are far from enough. All the players in the entire Anduin continent are the targets that Sumu wants to drive. What he paid was nothing but something that was useless to himself, or something that he could easily shape, and what he gained was the help of millions of players in the entire Anduin continent. Actually, as early as the news had just spread, a player guild had already launched a bounty on the official forum. The wider the news spread, the more game guilds participated in the bounty. Wait until the 3 main quests with rich rewards to burst the table become the focus of all players. The highest bounty amount is born. 4 books of the undead. The clues of each book of the undead are worth 5 million. If players who have obtained the book of the undead are willing to take action, they will directly offer a price of 20 million and a lot of other discounts. This is the first main quest, a clue to the legendary undead, a piece worth 3 million. This is the second main quest. It's hard to imagine that the value of just one clue is calculated in millions. Actually, the price is not only not high, but low. Just like the book of the undead, the clues of a book of the undead means an exclusive undead job template for the Lord rank, which means 1 epic equipment, 2 dark gold equipment and 10 golden equipment, or an epic career template for the living. The former may not be enough to move the large-scale game guilds, while the latter, an epic career template, means a future epic hero. And in the continent of Anduin, an epic hero can almost become the backbone of a human kingdom. How much value can such an existence bring to a game guild? Immeasurable. Any large game guild with more than 100,000 members will not be short of money. The potential of Second World can be seen at a glance. Behind those large game guilds, which one is not a big company or a big consortium, millions and tens of millions in cash, these are all petty money. If you can really get an epic job template, a legendary job template, and then cultivate your own epic hero or legendary hero, that's the real big money. Original. The opening of the undead camp and the release of the 3 main quests brought together the focus of countless players. When those game guilds participated in the competition for quest rewards in the form of bounties, it completely detonated the enthusiasm of the players. With this overwhelming propaganda, few people are unaware of these 2 news. Under the temptation of millions and tens of millions of bonuses, there are basically few players who are not interested therefore. Countless Anduin mainland players gave up participating in the war between human kingdoms, and turned their goals to finding the 4 books of the dead and clues to the legendary undead boss. There are also a large number of players who chose the Anduin continent as their birthplace because of the newly opened undead camp. Whether it can successfully join the undead camp is another story. Players born in the Anduin continent have a better chance than players born in other continents. Right, that's it. Use gear and career templates as bait. Players throughout the Anduin continent revolved around Suma's mission. Suma's goal also finally achieved. 3 million, 5 million, 20 million rich. It's a lot. North of Caesar's empire, barbarian territory. A player who was over 2 meters tall and had large navy blue and strange patterns tattooed on his body muttered a few words. His heart was extremely bitter. If I have 20 million, no, as long as 3 million, I can make a. My sister was sent to the best hospital for treatment. I doesn't have to be paralyzed in bed all the time. Unfortunately, my birth race is a barbarian. Without the permission of the patriarch, I cannot easily leave the clan. Otherwise, I can also look for clues to the Book of the Undead or the legendary undead. But fortunately, the elders in the clan value me very much. As long as I complete the last trial, I can successfully advance to the mentor rank. At that time, I can leave the clan and go to find clues. Even if I can't find me, I can still accept the quest as a bounty hunter, earn game currency, and then exchange it for cash on the forum to subsidize my family. The days will always get better and better. Seemingly thinking of a bright future, this robust player couldn't help showing a smile after being bitter. Heartless Fish. This is the player's in-game nickname. As the first batch of players who entered the game world from the very beginning of Second World, the fish without heart can be said to have excellent luck or extremely bad luck. Said he was lucky because, after entering the game, his birthplace is the ice and snow world at the northernmost tip of the Anduin continent. His birth race is the only race living here, barbarian, not the human race like other players. As one of the strongest enemies of Caesar's empire in the north, the barbarians were naturally strong and able to withstand strong winds and colds. When a barbarian becomes an adult, his height is basically no less than 2 meters. As a humanoid race with dual growth of strength and physique, barbarians also have the racial talent of frost resistance. Basically, even in a low temperature environment of -20 or 30 degrees, a barbarian will not feel that cold. It is precisely because of this racial talent that a small number of barbarians can survive and multiply in this ice and snow world. In addition, as the only player who has become a barbarian in his own knowledge, Heartless Fish not only has the racial talent of ice and snow resistance, but also has an additional personal talent, divine power. The effect of this talent is that, when his level increases, his strength will increase by an additional 0.5 times. The barbarians were originally a humanoid race that grew both in strength and physique. The barbarian's occupation template, coupled with the Heartless Fish's own divine power talent, makes his power attribute grow in length, far exceeding that of ordinary barbarians, and more than most players in the game world. In the second month of entering the game world, his extraordinary strength attributes grew, which attracted the attention of the barbarian elders, and he was trained as an elite in the clan. It is precisely because of the vigorous cultivation of the barbarians that the Heartless Fish can enter the position of mentor without any player's help and become the top players in the entire game world. With this kind of luck, the fish without heart is of course very lucky. Said he was unlucky because fish without a heart is because he took a fancy to the potential of Second World. If he wanted to earn money to subsidize his family in this world, he finally borrowed a sum of money to buy a virtual game cabin and enter the game world. However, it was because of his good luck that he was valued by the elders of the clan, and he became one of the few barbarian clan members who were not allowed to leave the clan land until they had completed all the trials. If you can't leave the clan, you can't take tasks, you can't make money, and you can't subsidize your family. This is naturally bad luck for a player who continues to use money in reality, and he was sleepy for more than 2 years. During this process, he has tried countless times to contact the game guilds and sell his future to the game guilds in exchange for a sum of money. With his satisfied identity and the talent of divine power, it is extremely feasible, but my sister doesn't agree. In Amma's words, her leg has been paralyzed for more than 10 years, and even if it needs to be cured, it is not in a hurry. And, despite the difficult circumstances at home, they were able to persevere. He is different. The identity of a barbarian and a divine talent make him destined to have a brilliant future. If you sign a contract with the game guild, you can get a sum of money in the short term, but it is equivalent to taking all the glorious future in, and when the reputation is not worth enough, even if the future is sold, those game guilds may not give a good price. So bitter heat. When the Heartless Fish came out and got the approval of the patriarch, he could leave the clan, and he and Ami really came out. At that time, with enough strength, whether he is taking tasks to make money, or choosing to join the game guild, his future will be far more brilliant than the present. He believed it. Ami has been smarter than him, since she was a child, so Ami's words must not be wrong. So, a fish without a heart, Zhao Rive now. Once again, returning to the game from the forum, Heartless Fish no longer thinks about the 3 tasks and the corresponding rewards circulating on the forum. Those were too far away for him. Passing the last trial as soon as possible and making money to subsidize the family as soon as possible are what he should think about most. Only what he didn't expect was, when he returned to the game world from the forum, a mighty old man with a shirtless upper body and a head taller than him appeared in front of him. "You, the patriarch wants to see you." When he heard this sentence, Heartless Fish suddenly raised his head and looked at the mighty old man in front of him with surprise. "Patriarch, the patriarch sees me for." This mighty old man is the barbarian elder who discovered the extraordinary talent of Fish Without Heart, and the chief of the barbarians. Since he was introduced to the patriarch by the elder, and the patriarch also set himself the rule that he must not leave the clan until he completes the trial, he has never seen the patriarch again. This time the patriarch summoned. Does it mean that? You are right. The mighty old man slapped the Heartless Fish on the arm and said with a big laugh, "The patriarch already knows your hard work. During this period of time, get ready, the patriarch is going to personally take you to complete the final part of the trial. After completing the final trial, you guys can go out and explore the world on your own." The news brought by the mighty old man was definitely a surprise for the Fish Without Heart. After completing the last trial, he can be promoted to the rank of mentor. Divine power. The growth of superpower attributes brought about by talent made him have a combat power that surpassed most ordinary occupations when he first entered the rank of mentor. And so, he can finally make money to subsidize his family, and his and Ami's life will finally improve. Excited in his heart, the Heartless Fish couldn't help bowing to the mighty old man. "Teacher, thank you. If it weren't for you," seeing the gesture of a fish without a heart, the mighty old man was a little unhappy. "We barbarians are not so polite. In the future, don't learn from those hypocritical guys in the human world. Go see the patriarch." Following the patriarch, passing this final test, and showing the prestige of our barbarians on the mainland in the future is the greatest reward for the old man. Fish Without a Heart didn't say anything, just silently remembered the words of the mighty old man in his heart. This is the barbarian, robust, rude, full of true nature. This is his teacher, powerful, bold, yet attentive. Nodding silently, under the leadership of the mighty old man, the Heartless Fish crossed more than half of the clan's land, and met the barbarian clan chief in an extraordinarily huge igloo. Fish Without a Heart, the pinnacle of the elite ranks, 2 meters 2. The mighty old man, the pinnacle of the epic rank, 2 meters 3. And the patriarch of the barbarian, the legendary rank, 2 meters 5. Basically, the strength of a barbarian can be seen from the height. The stronger the barbarian, the higher the height basically, and vice versa. When the Fish Without Heart arrived, several other barbarian youths who had been trained with him had already arrived. When the mighty old man arrived with the Heartless Fish, the barbarian patriarch just nodded and walked outside the igloo. The young barbarians followed behind the patriarch, and the Heartless Fish also hurriedly followed under the signal of the mighty old man, left the igloo, and walked toward the north of the clan. He vaguely remembered, to the north of the barbarian land is a snowy mountain, and that snow mountain is an absolute forbidden place for barbarians. Follow along. Not a word. It took more than 2 hours before the Heartless Fish crossed the snowfield and climbed the snow mountain under the leadership of the barbarian patriarch, and appeared in front of a huge ice cave above the snow mountain. The patriarch enters. Fish Without a Heart is a close second. He has a taciturn temperament. No one speaks, and he naturally won't take the initiative to find a topic. Enter from the entrance of the ice cave. After passing through a 100-meter-long sloping passage on the ice block, the Heartless Fish was surprised to find that they had entered a large hall. One that is now in the snow-capped mountains was also excavated from a huge block of ice. Crystal Hall. A faint cold mist floats. Even with the racial talent of frost resistance, Heartless Fish couldn't help shivering at the end of the line when entering this hall. The Fish Without Heart couldn't help raising his head, looking around 5.5 and looking forward, but just a glance. If the only barbarian player was struck by lightning, he would stand on the spot. On both sides of the hall, there are ice chairs carved from ice cubes. From the entrance of the main hall, it has been extended to the depths of the main hall. There are already more than half of the ice chairs, that add up to hundreds of people only. These figures are not barbarians. They are not other living creatures. They are corpses that are either dry or painful, or only skeletons. Look carefully. The eyes of the corpses were flickering with faint blue flames, and it seemed that they could faintly see the corpses moving, as if they would stand up from the ice chairs at any time. Deep inside the hall, there is an ice chair as large as a throne. On that extra huge ice chair, there is a huge figure sitting. If you stand up, this figure may surpass the patriarch and reach a height of 2.7 meters. But this figure is still not a barbarian. The blue soul fire, the body with dry cancer, the pale bones, and the terrifying aura emanating from the body. This figure, clearly a undead, a legendary undead boss transformed from the most powerful barbarian corpse. Barbarian corpses, undead boss. This is the last trial I have to face. When he saw the terrifying figure at the end of the hall, this was the first thought that popped into the mind of the heartless fish. What are you doing there? Why don't you come and meet your ancestors soon? Subsequently, the rough and low voice of the barbarian patriarch came, and the heartless fish was shocked. He looked up and saw that the patriarch and several other barbarian youths had reached the depths of the hall, only he was still standing at the entrance of the hall in astonishment. La. In response, the heartless fish hurriedly accelerated his pace, walked to the depths of the hall, and lined up with several other barbarian youths. At this time, the face of the barbarian patriarch softened a little, and apologized to the tall figure on the ice throne. Forgive the ancestor, he is just. Before the patriarch's words were finished, the tall figure spoke up. Ha, do not worry about it. We choose to live in this identity, and naturally we have to face the troubles caused by this identity. Besides, when you came to meet us, your reaction was not much better than this little guy. The voice was hoarse and low, like a leaking bellows, but the heartless fish did not hear a trace of cruelty belonging to the undead, but instead heard a trace of love, hidden in this voice. Certainly not. Hearing the figure's words, the barbarian patriarch was anxious. Ancestor, you and the patriarchs chose to stay in the world as undead forever in order to protect our clan. It's definitely not living. Okay, let's skip this topic. The terrifying figure chuckled and said, are these little guys the new seedlings of this batch? It's not bad that there is a 01 little guy with a talent for divine power. I don't have much time to wake up. Let's start as soon as possible. Talking, the figure waved his hand, and when he saw it, a dark blue emanated from its hand, turned into several beams, and rushed into the bodies of the heartless fish and the other barbarian youths. The last part of the so-called trial. It is with the help of the power of this barbarian ancestor, who has turned into an undead, to break through the shackles of elite occupations and the unique mentor occupation of advanced barbarians. Frost Growler. Dark blue beams poured in. Heartless fish clearly feel that their body is changing rapidly. The fog in the hall no longer gave him the chills. His health, magic and four-dimensional attributes had all increased at this moment, and even the skills he once possessed had taken frost damage. Advanced is complete. From this moment on, the only barbarian player officially stepped from the elite rank to the mentor rank, and transferred to the Frost Growler, which is extremely rare among the barbarians, a powerful profession with both physical attack and frost damage. Subsequently, the barbarian patriarch took them to bow to the figure on the ice chair, and then took them out of the hall, the ice cave, and back to the barbarian clan. It was not until this time that the voice of the barbarian patriarch came. After completing the trial, you can move freely, inheriting the existence of the temple and ancestors, the top secret of our clan. You can't leak it, and you can't be rash. Proposal. You just need to remember that without the sacrifices of our ancestors, and the patriarchs of all generations, our barbarians would have been destroyed long ago. You really grow up, and you will naturally know. The barbarian patriarch left behind barbarian players who have returned to their free status only. The barbarian ancestors. Legend. Undead boss. His eyes swept over the few barbarian youths who left, and over the houses built with ice blocks in the clan's land, and his heart was extremely tangled. He did not expect, just a moment ago, I was still envious of those players in the human world, envious that they could find clues in the book of the undead and the legendary undead boss, and pursue the great wealth represented by these two clues. At the next moment, not only did he pass the test, he was transferred to Frost Growler, and he could move freely from then on, and he also got the clues of the legendary undead boss. A legendary undead boss worth 3 million. He only needs to send the coordinates of the representative of the temple that the barbarian Snow Mountain has inherited to the game guilds that offer bounties, and he can easily obtain such a huge amount of wealth. He and Amma's life will no longer be tight. With these 3 million sisters, she can also receive the best treatment, and she will no longer be paralyzed and become a normal person. Is he going to do this? For more than 2 years without contact with the outside world, the heartless fish has completely integrated into the life of the barbarians. The life of the barbarians is hard, but warm and peaceful. If you sell the clues yourself, I'm afraid it will break the calm of the barbarians, right? A fish. The trial is over. "What are you doing standing here?" Just when the heartless fish was extremely tangled, the mighty old man's voice came again. This tall and mighty old man had appeared in front of him at some point in time. A heavy slap slapped the heartless fish, and the old man laughed loudly. "You were taken aback, right? But it's normal." When the old man entered the inheritance temple, he was also taken aback. "After completing the trial, you guys can leave the clan and wander freely. But don't forget at any time, there are still your family members here. When you encounter difficulties outside, you must always remember that you still have family members here waiting for you, sheltering you, and being your backing." Yes, family. Watching the mighty old man leave his back, the heartless fish was even more entangled. He also has family here. In the ice and snow world and the game world, the many barbarians are his family. Reality, am I, who is still suffering from hardships, is his only relative? His expression was full of torment and pain. After taking a last look at this barbarian clan, the heartless fish left the game world. The first, undead boss of the legendary rank found Caesar's capital. Looking at the information that appeared on his attribute panel, Sumu was slightly taken aback. Almost a month has passed since he actually opened the undead camp. During this month, he relied on the long-distance displacement ability of phase shift to cross an extremely long distance, created dozens of cities of the undead on the Anduin continent, and transformed a total of more than 500,000 players into players of the undead camp. Subsequently, he returned to the capital of Caesar, which was still in a frozen state. No aboriginal people came. Perhaps it was because he was afraid of Suma's UI, or perhaps many people came to Caesar's capital to check, and they evacuated after the check was completed. When Sumu returned again, the ruins of the city remained the same. The main city of the undead is not in a hurry for the time being, but so many undead camp players always need a base, so Sumu took a fancy to Caesar's capital. He wants to transform the capital of Caesar and use it as a temporary base camp for players of the undead camp. In the process of this transformation, Sumu is also waiting patiently, waiting for the many players to collect the clues they need one by one and gather them into their hands. It's just that he didn't expect it. It's only a month's time. The clue of a legendary undead boss was found. Players, after obtaining the corresponding clues, can submit the corresponding clues to Sumu through the task system without appearing in front of Sumu, but to accept the task reward, you still have to appear in front of Sumu. The system provides the convenience of the task system, but does not provide the express service of rewards. The location of this undead boss is Barbarian Territory, Doksu Mountain, Inheritance Temple. Identity is the ancestor of the barbarians, and the occupation is suspected to be a swordsman. It's detailed enough. Looking at the information displayed in the mission system, Sumu pondered slightly. The territory of the barbarians is located in the north of Caesar's empire, not too close to him, but with the phase shift, he will be able to rush over in about a day or two. Barbarians and Caesar's empire and the human world are considered hostile relations. Usually, there will be many strong human beings invading the territory of the barbarians to obtain the special frost monster skins and magic stones. When it is extremely cold, the barbarians will also invade south and plunder the food and materials of the human world. The northern fortress of Caesar's empire was specially built to resist the invasion of barbarians. It is not difficult to pass through the territory of the barbarians and enter the Doksu Mountain with his strength, and even if he is not discovered by the barbarians, it is not a problem. Think about it. Sumu Ray edited it in his quest system and sent it to the player who submitted the information. Let them wait for themselves outside the North 477 fortress of the Caesar Empire in 3 days. If the clues are true, he will issue rewards for the players in that place, no matter whether the player is a player from the undead camp or a player from the human world. Subsequently, Sumu greeted, and Carola, who was playing in Caesar's capital, cheered and rushed to Suma's side, appearing on Suma's back again in the form of a strange pendant. Then, a phase shift, Sumu left Caesar's imperial capital with Carola and headed towards the barbarian territory in the northern part of Caesar's empire, at this time outside the city of a human kingdom. A spellcaster player who is approaching middle age and has stepped into the mentor rank looks nervously at the zombie professional player with green face and fangs in front of him. Around him, there are more than 5 mentor professional players and more than 500 elite professional players. All these players, the purpose is not to encircle the zombie professional player, but to protect the zombie professional player. After submitting the task, the zombie professional player was waiting anxiously. It wasn't until new information appeared on his quest panel that the zombie professional player was pleasantly surprised. President, it's a success. The King of Bones will personally verify the authenticity of the clues. If the clue of the legendary undead boss is true, he let us arrive at the northern fortress of Caesar's empire in 3 days, and collect the reward outside the northern fortress. The exact location coordinates are: the middle-aged spellcaster player, the president of a large game guild, breathed a sigh of relief after receiving the reply from the professional zombie player, who was originally from his own guild and joined the undead camp by chance. He thought about it and said, "Contact the game guild on the Caesar Empire side and let them help us reach the northern fortress. When necessary, you can pay some price. Be sure to reach North Fortress within 2 days. Their location is not too close to the northern fortress. Not just one city, but 2 or 3 countries. 2 days are tight." Sumu did not know that in order to rush to the northern fortress of the Caesar Empire as soon as possible, the president of a large game guild took the elite players in his guild and crossed the cities through the teleportation array. They even paid a small price to buy teleportation scrolls, or obtained assistance from other game guilds, just to cross the distance of half a continent within 2 days and arrive at the place to receive the quest rewards ahead of time. With the huge magical power value stored in the Source of Darkness, after obtaining the clues of the first legendary undead boss, Sumu took Kerala all the way north. A phase shift can span a distance of hundreds of kilometers. Even so, by the time Sumu crossed the northern fortress and arrived at the barbarian territory, it was already 2 days later. In the territory of the barbarians, a piece of ice was frozen. The plants here are only coniferous forests that survive in the world of ice and snow. The animals here are only the frost-type monsters that are born in ice and snow, grow longer than ice and snow, and integrate into ice and snow. It has to be said that the living environment of the barbarians is extremely harsh. It is this harsh living environment that shapes the strength of the individual barbarians. It is also this harsh living environment that the barbarians will invade the Caesar Empire from time to time, to obtain necessary food and materials to help their own people through the most difficult times. Period of severe cold. From the point of view of the barbarians, all the barbarians who invaded the south were warriors who fought bloody battles for the survival of their own people. From the point of view of the human beings, all the barbarians were demons, bandits, and enemies who would burn, kill and loot. There is no right or wrong in this world. The so-called right and wrong are just different perspectives. Humans and barbarians are like that. The dead and the living. Why not? After appearing in the barbarian territory, Sumu could already see the snowy mountain that stood far on the horizon. After 3 consecutive phase shifts, he took Kerala to the foot of the Daksu mountain. During this process, he did not see a barbarian clan, and naturally no barbarian people noticed the arrival of the King of Bones. The territory of the barbarians is not small. It is comparable to a middle-level human kingdom, but in this vast world of ice and snow, the total number of barbarians living is less than 1 million. Not even a big city in the human kingdom. Nature, the wide area and the sparse population have become one of the characteristics here. Appearing at the foot of Daksu mountain, Sumu is not in a hurry. With the detailed coordinates displayed in the mission system, even if the ice cave and the inheritance temple were extremely hidden, it would not be difficult for Sumu. Only half an hour later, they appeared before the ice cave. Going deeper and deeper along the road carved out of the ice, Sumu and Kerala soon entered the heritage temple that the Heartless Fish had entered. In the huge ice and snow hall, hundreds of ice chairs are lined up neatly. Continuing to the end of the hall, hundreds of ice chairs. There are already a small half of the seats filled with figures. These figures are either dry, broken, or only left with skeletons. All the figures exude a pure breath of death. Based on Sumu's understanding of the undead, it can naturally be seen that these figures have either been completely transformed into undead, or are in the process of this transformation. More than 40 figures, more than 30 have been completely transformed, and less than 10 are still in the process of transformation. In the lair of a legendary undead boss, it is not surprising that other undead brothers appear, but the key is that all these undeads that have been transformed, and are being transformed are all epic. To know, it was the city of the undead that had the 2 legendary bosses of Argus and Nefarian, and the number of epic undead bosses was only 3. And here, there are more than 40 people. This number, this rank really surprised Sumu. Look inside along the row of ice chairs. Sumu saw the undead mentioned in the mission system, sitting on a huge ice chair like a throne. The tall undead was much taller than the standing Sumu even if he was sitting, as if he was a little giant. Over 2 meters tall, masses of pale skeletons exposed beneath the broken, dry black flesh, and the pure breath of death and darkness emanating from the body. This figure is indeed a legendary undead boss, and it is by no means as simple as an ordinary legendary rank perhaps. This undead boss is not comparable to Argus and Nefarian, who stand at the top of the continent, but it has surpassed most of the legendary ranks, and has become one of the top ones. Of course, this is not the most important thing. Most importantly, From this barbarian undead boss, Sumu not only felt the pure breath of death and darkness, but also felt the same source of information as the Lich Note and Ghost Note. This undead boss has the breath of one of the other two undead notebooks, only I don't know if it's the Bone Note or the Death Note. Sumu took Carola into the Temple of Inheritance, and the breath of death that did not belong to the barbarians also alarmed many undead. In this ice hall on the ice chair, the head of the epic undead stood up, grabbed the weapon beside him, and turned his soul-fired head in the direction of Sumu and Carola. The end of the hall, the most powerful undead boss also stood up, grabbed a two-handed sword on the ice chair like a door panel, and stared at the two strange figures who stepped into the hall. Outsiders, this is not the place you should be. It is still the voice of the ancestors of the barbarians, but, unlike the last time, this time, there is no longer a trace of kindness in the voice, but full of coldness and chill. The barbarian ancestors were not in a hurry. It could feel that the black armored figure who set foot on the barbarian forbidden area was also an undead. It's just an epic rank, but the body of this undead makes it feel a great threat. Satisfying the ancestors did not know who Sumu was. In its long slumber, it struggled with its own madness and bloodlust, and the only awake time was used to help the young generation of the barbarians to obtain inheritance nature. It doesn't know Sumu, let alone what kind of panic this King of Bones once caused on the Anduin continent. The barbarian ancestors did not know why this undead, who was only an epic rank, made himself feel a great threat. It only knows this is Heritage Temple. It is the place where he and many barbarian patriarchs, who voluntarily transformed into undead, slept. It is also the background and final trump card of the entire barbarian race. Here, even for barbarians, it is forbidden. What about outsiders? Even if these two outsiders belong to the same dead as they are. Ha ha. With a chuckle, Sumu looked at the tall figure with interest. Without needing more information, he has already deduced the origin of this inheritance temple, the undead boss, and many epic rank undead. Undead boss, that is, the barbarian ancestor, who got the undead note. He did not withstand the temptation of the undead note, and at a certain time transformed himself from the living to the undead. It's just that he didn't lose his memory, or even lose his mind. After becoming an undead, this barbarian ancestor not only did not slaughter the living, but instead chose to become the guardian of the barbarian. Subsequently, the Heritage Temple was built. After having the first guardian of the undead, more and more barbarians of the younger generation choose to be transformed into undead before dying, sleeping in this inheritance temple like their ancestors, and becoming new guardians slowly. A long time has passed. That barbarian ancestor has grown to the heights it is today, and dozens of epic undead bosses have been accumulated in this Heritage Temple. From the point of view of the barbarians, the ancestors of the barbarians can be said to be great. Even those ancestors who were transformed into undead have made huge sacrifices. Only this is only for barbarians. For the human world, the barbarians who were originally demons, bandits and swordsmen, plus the many undead hidden in this Heritage Temple, are really the enemies of all human camps. Sumu is undead and does not need to think about the thoughts of the human camp. He does not belong to the barbarian, and he does not need to consider the idea of the barbarian. He was just curious, exactly which undead notebook can make the barbarian ancestors so easily create so many epic undead bosses. Click. Ignoring the warnings of the barbarian ancestors, Sumu moved on. This is equivalent to declaring war. The soul fire in his eyes twitched fiercely, and the barbarian ancestor, clutching the great sword in both hands, jumped and charged towards Sumu directly from the huge ice chair. With his own weapon, he attacked Sumu. The naked eye can see the sound waves of Chang spread out. Carol, Jiao Jiao, who was floating beside Sumu, shouted suddenly at this time, and layers of sound waves continued to spread around, echoing in this hall. Annihilation Howl. This is Corola's boss skill. The layers of sound waves continued to spread like ocean waves, not only blasting the 30 or so epic undead that rushed over, but the spreading sound waves were still shaking their bodies and their bones. It seems to shake them all into powder. The natural Princess Mononoke is naturally not comparable to ordinary epic undead. Agnes still needs to be tempered again and again by the jet black beam of light, before she can slowly gain the ability to fight beyond the order. And Carola only needs to grow up. She herself is the invincible king of the same order. A cry of annihilation resolved the siege of many epic undead. Carola's body was constantly changing between reality and reality, and appeared behind the epic undead closest to her at a teleport-like speed. I don't know, when the slender and sharp nails grew out of my hands, piercing the head of the epic undead fiercely. Corola's fight doesn't need Sumu to worry about Khan. Ignoring the many epic undead that were still attacking tirelessly, Sumu stepped forward, and the skeleton sword in his hand was full of the ultimate breath of death and darkness. and he chopped it out from the bottom up, towards the already valeed, the barbarian ancestor who slashed his two-handed sword down like the top of Mount Tai. Boom! Accompanied by the roar that resounded throughout the inheritance temple, the skeletal sword lingering in black mist, and the smashing sword with both hands that shone with dark blue light collided together. A mighty attack. There were large cracks on the floor made of huge blocks of ice under Suma's feet, and the barbarian ancestors were blown away by unparalleled power, and directly hit the top of the inheritance temple more than 10 meters high. A deep imprint was struck on the dome, which was also made of ice. The strength attribute of up to 81,000 points makes Sumu enough to wrestle with the dragon today, not to mention a barbarian undead. Even if the barbarians have the growth of the dual attributes of strength and physique, their strength cannot be compared to a legendary dragon. Lost in the first round, the barbarian ancestors were not discouraged, pounced again from above the dome. A layer of dark blue light spread on the body of the barbarian ancestor, and the two-handed sword in his hand exuded an extreme chill. When rushing into the range of only 10 meters from Sumu, the dark blue light circulating on the barbarian ancestor suddenly burst out, and his tall body was like a top spinning and approaching Sumu at a high speed. Large swaths of dark blue light were released from the two-handed swords of the barbarian ancestors, forming a huge tornado covering a range of dozens of meters, sweeping towards Sumu. This move is exactly the signature skill of Juggernaut Blade Storm, only the barbarian ancestor's occupation was frozen Juggernaut, and the Blade Storm he unleashed not only had the ultimate physical cutting ability of the ordinary Juggernaut, but also had extremely strong frost damage. In the first fight, the barbarian ancestors were defeated. It further confirms that this undead, who only has an epic rank, poses a great threat to itself. So, when the second fight was 477, the barbarian ancestors unhesitatingly unleashed their strongest skills. With the Blade Storm, that ripped everything in the extreme ice cold, he completely killed this strange undead. Blade Storm. Sumu frowned. Before the sharp blade spread, he stepped out and appeared behind the barbarian ancestors. The Temple of Inheritance is huge. The range of the Blade Storm is also dozens of meters away. The large chunks of ice were torn apart by the sword energy, and the ground of the Inheritance Temple was in a mess. Even the dome was penetrated by the scattered sword energy, and the large chunks of ice fell down. The battleground for Kerala and those epic undead has shifted. Whether it was Kerala or the 30 or so undead, it was difficult for them to bear the terrifying damage caused by the Blade Storm. When the barbarian ancestors unleashed the Blade Storm, they had already moved the battlefield to the other side of the hall. Behind barbarian ancestors, dodging the mighty Blade Storm, Sumu stood a few dozen meters away from the tall undead, and stretched out a hand. Next moment, the ground completely shattered by ice cubes. Countless tiny bones quickly condensed into a huge skeleton hand, holding the barbarian ancestors in it. The Blade Storm continues. The innumerable sword energy slashed wildly, smashing and obliterating large tracts of bones, turning them into scattered ashes only. After all, this hand of bones imprisoned the barbarian ancestors for a brief moment. Just this moment, phase shift, straight through the lower area formed by Blade Storm, Suma's figure emerged from behind the barbarian ancestors. The skeletal sword that shone with light was cut out at the moment when the imprisoned hand collapsed. Countless tiny bones collapsed and submerged into the ground again. 10 jet black sword beams joined together, and at this moment, they slashed on an arm of the barbarian ancestor. As a race with double growth in strength and physique, the defense of barbarians far exceeds that of humans, and after being transformed into undead, the defense power of the barbarian ancestors is several times higher than that of the barbarians, only. It may be able to block the skeleton sword cut out by Sumu, but it definitely can't stop the dark sword light cut out by the skeleton sword. 20 times the damage of the normal attack burst out, and the barbarian ancestors didn't even have time to let out a scream, and a huge arm flew into the air and fell to the ground. This is not the end. After cutting off an arm of the barbarian ancestor, Sumu released the second death cut without the slightest hesitation, cutting off the second arm of this tall undead. Lost his arm, lost his two-handed great sword. Blade Storm is naturally difficult to sustain. When the Blade Storm stopped, Suma's figure had already jumped high, and one of his hands was on the head of the barbarian ancestor, that was twice his size. Boom! Huge chunks of ice shattered. This tall undead with a height of more than 2.7 meters was stunned by Suma's head, his face was down, and he was smashed to the ground. Lost both arms. A skill of the barbarian ancestors cannot be used. When Sumu, whose strength attribute was enough to crush it, appeared on its back, one hand pressed its head, and one foot stepped on its back. The only thing this tall undead can do is struggle. Ice cubes, breaking. The temple is shaking. That big piece of falling ice couldn't change the fact that it was firmly suppressed by Sumu the other end of the hall. Seeing that their ancestors were suppressed, More than a dozen epic undead abandoned Kerala and ran towards this side, trying to rescue their ancestors from Suma's suppression. After more than a dozen ice barriers in a row blocked all of his surroundings, Sumu calmly suppressed the barbarian ancestors with the strength of those epic undead. Don't even think about smashing that layer of ice barrier within half an hour. A legendary undead boss, and a powerful undead transformed from barbarians. Its value is still very high. If he wanted to kill him, Sumu would have done it as early as the first time he fought. Why waste time? But it is for the slave of servitude. A legendary undead boss, plus dozens of epic undead bosses. As long as this power can be subdued, the power of Suma's command will increase instantly. Comparison: the free points represented by this undead boss, and those dozens of epic undead are relatively light. Erosion, talent activated. Unknown energy continuously poured into the body of the barbarian ancestors, and began to erode this huge undead. Perhaps he sensed Suma's intentions, or perhaps it was pure grief and anger. The barbarian ancestors struggled desperately, trying to get up from Suma's suppression only. No matter how hard it struggles, it is difficult to change the fact that unknown energy keeps pouring in, and eroding its body slowly. The barbarian ancestors lost control of their bodies. In the endless panic, he could only feel the cool unknown emperor rushing towards his head, constantly occupying his head, and constantly eroding his soul. Scenes emerged from Suma's eyes. This is the memory of the barbarian ancestors. From the centuries-long memory of the barbarian ancestor, he saw how it got a dark notebook, and how it couldn't bear the temptation of the notebook, and transformed itself into an undead before dying, falling from the legendary rank to the epic rank, and then, it took hundreds of years to return to the legendary rank. And in the process, this inheritance temple was built, and the existence of the descendant patriarchs, who stepped into the legendary rank, was selected, and they were transformed into undead like themselves, and became the heritage and shelter of the barbarians. Of course, in the process, many skills originally possessed by the barbarian ancestors were also acquired by Sumu, and added to his skill arsenal. Time flies. When the 10 layers of ice barriers he laid were shattered on 3 sides, Suma's palm left the head of the barbarian ancestor. He slowly got up and walked down from the tall undead. And what about the barbarian ancestors? With difficulty, he got up, retrieved his arm, and used the breath of death to take back the tall undead above his body with a roar. The remaining epic undead stopped attacking. Ding! You have gained control of the corpse sword Master Mist. You enslaved the corpse sword Saint Mist. You have obtained the transfer information for the epic professional template Skull Swordsman. You have obtained the transfer information of the legendary profession template Corpse Juggernaut. You have obtained the transfer information for the tutor job template Frost Growler. You have obtained the job transfer information of hero profession template Frost Master. You have obtained the transfer information of epic job template Ice Crystal Swordsman. You have obtained the transfer information of the legendary profession template Frozen Juggernaut. Accompanied by the crisp system prompt sound in his mind, a large amount of information was refreshed from Suma's attribute panel. These messages, except for the first 2, which reminded him that he had successfully enslaved the barbarian ancestor Mist, the rest were all new job templates he obtained. In the Skeleton Swordsman and the Corpse Swordsman, this is the profession owned by the barbarian ancestor Mist, after he transformed himself into the undead. From the Frost Growler to the Frozen Sword Saint, it is the occupational inheritance that Mist possessed during his lifetime, that is, the origin of this inheritance temple. As the barbarian's unique occupation inheritance system, the barbarian ancestor Mist, but the creator of this whole set of occupation inheritance system. After reading the information refreshed on the property panel, Sumu closed his property panel. The acquisition of the career template, Juggernaut of Corpse, has enabled Sumu to have 3 career templates of legendary ranks, and it is only the last one away from the final synthesis, that is, the professional template of the Scourge Knight. However, that's all for later. Whether it is to train Agnes into a Scourge Knight, or to find the last undead note Death Note, it will take a long time to get the job transfer information of the Scourge Knight. Now, Sumu stretched out his hand, and Mr. who had already put his arms back on his body, bowed down respectfully, and put a dark notebook in his hand. This notebook is the Undead Note Skull Note that Mist obtained hundreds of years ago, or Skeleton Notes. Same as before. After getting the Skull Notebook, Sumu did not open the notebook immediately, but first eroded the notebook completely with the erosion talent, and only opened it after all the marks hidden in it. As Sumu expected, the Skull Notebook does not contain the class templates for the epic and legendary ranks of the Skull Clan Lord rank. It was originally the end of the Skull family. From the sinking of the living to the undead, the rank will drop to the first rank. This is the iron rule of the game world, and cannot be changed. Of course, this refers to transformation, not job transfer. Like the player, like Argus, like the former Rogris, they all belong to the category of transfer. Players aside, both Rogris and Argus used the Note of the Dead and the huge Aura of Death to successfully complete the transfer and keep their ranks convert. Essentially, a creature that has died and returned under the action of the Death Note, or the Breath of Death, will only drop the rank. Look at legions of the undead throughout history. After a legendary mage is transformed into an undead, it may become an epic archlich. A legendary hero may be transformed into an epic wailing banshee after being transformed into a ghost, but never a legendary hero has been transformed into an undead and become an epic skeleton, because the Lord rank is the end of the original skeleton family. Of course, this does not mean that the existence of epic or even legendary ranks will never appear in the skeleton clan. For example, the Bone Dragon is essentially a combination of the skeleton family and the legendary dragon family. Sumu, for example, also grew up from the skeleton family in essence. Another example is the skull note he just obtained. The information recorded in this notebook is how he transformed a legendary hero into an epic skeleton. The barbarian ancestor Mist, with the help of the skeleton notebook, transformed himself from a legendary frozen swordsman to an epic skeleton swordsman, and then spent hundreds of years to return to the legend and become a corpse swordsman. The dozens of figures in the Temple of Inheritance also used the information contained in the skull notes to transform the barbarian patriarchs, who entered the legendary realm, but their lives came to an end, into epic undead. Under the premise of not building an altar of death and receiving the breath of death from the plane of death, Mist can only nourish those corpses with the breath of death he possesses, and slowly transform them into undead. For Sumu. Not the same. As long as there is a corpse of a legendary hero, he can quickly transform into an undead boss that has reached the epic rank. Of course, the epic undead transformed in this way basically have no potential for further advancement. Like Agnes, like Carola, like Mist, the undead boss, who can advance on their own. After all, it is a very small part. Even so, this skull notebook is also of great significance to Sumu. At least, from then on, he no longer has to worry that he has only a few top-level undead under his command, and no matter what he does, he needs to go out himself. After enslaving Mist, he also controlled dozens of epic undead in the Inheritance Temple through Zest, plus the other epic undead he transformed later. The undead camp he established has finally been propped up. Learn the information contained in the skull notes. Knowing how to transform the skeleton of the epic rank, Sumu threw the skeleton notebook into his storage space, and put it together with the Lich notebook. Then, he looked at Mr. a legendary corpse swordsman. Even if Mist's strength is not comparable to himself, Argus, or Nefarian, he is still a legendary undead boss after all. In the human world, such an undead boss can easily destroy a human kingdom, plus those dozens of epic undead. With such a power, he will not let go easily. Pack up and leave with this king. Following Sumu's words, Mist's tall figure knelt down on the ground like pushing a golden mountain down a jade pillar, and pleaded, "Lord, since I have followed the Lord, my subordinates will naturally not disobey. I just hope that the Lord will not disobey. Can leave a legacy to the barbarians." The inheritance that Mist said was the inheritance of the Frozen Sword Saint lineage. As the creator of this occupational system, Mist is also the only existence in the entire barbarian race who can inherit this occupational system. He left with Sumu, and the barbarians completely lost this most powerful professional heritage. "How do you want to do it?" Sumu asked in a deep voice. Mist paused for a moment and said, "My subordinates hope that when the Lord does not need his subordinates for the time being, he will be able to return to this inheritance temple and continue to pass on the profession at each stage. Isn't this a vacation?" Sumu chuckled lightly and did not refuse. Mist's feelings for barbarians are deeper than Argus' feelings for humans. Now that he has subdued Mist and fulfilled his small request, Sumu can still do it. The number of barbarians is too small. Even if they are all transformed into undead, they are of little use to him. On the contrary, it is to open up to the barbarian net, so that Mist can return to the barbarian inheritance profession on a regular basis, and Mist and the dozens of epic undead will be more attentive to do things for themselves. Although, after being enslaved by the eroded talent, everything in Mist was controlled by Sumu, but facing Sumu with a negative attitude and facing Sumu with a positive attitude can make a big difference. Agreed to Mist's request. After Mist and the dozens of epic undead packed up their belongings, a billowing demonic energy erupted from Sumu's body, shrouding them all. Subsequently, phase transfer starts. Dozens of figures disappeared from this heritage temple in an instant. Under the snow mountain, there are barbarian guards guarding it. When the battle between Sumu and Mist spread from the ice cave to the ears of the barbarian guards, these guards who did not have permission to step into the forbidden area of the barbarians immediately spread the abnormality of Doxo Mountain to the tribes soon. The barbarian patriarch led a few elders and rushed to Doxo Mountain at the fastest speed, before appearing in front of the ice cave. The dome of the Heritage Temple has been broken. Even if he has not yet entered the Temple of Inheritance, the barbarian patriarch can see the cracks appearing in the passage. He was shocked, passed through the half-collapsed passage at the fastest speed and entered the temple. The broken dome, the cracked ground, the shattered ice chair, and the huge pieces of ice scattered all over the hall all show that a fierce battle has taken place here. At this time, there are no more corpses on the broken ice chairs. On the throne-like ice chair deep in the hall, the figure of the barbarian ancestors was also lost. Some enemies entered the Inheritance Temple without them noticing, killed the ancestors and many previous patriarchs, and then left quietly. Even the corpses of ancestors and many previous patriarchs have not been preserved. The heart of the barbarian patriarch trembled. Zero, ask for flowers. Who is it? What kind of existence can kill the almost invincible ancestor, and so many ancestors in such a short period of time? In a trance, the barbarian patriarch suddenly saw that there seemed to be writing on the huge ice chair. He hurried forward. The ice chair is full of rune-like characters, all of which are barbarian characters. And these words mean, "We have left with the Lord. When the time comes, I will come here again and leave a legacy. The undead are irreversible, and the undead cannot be defeated. We do not want to face off against our mother clan. Remember, my lord." The king of costumes. There is not much to express in the text engraved on the entire ice chair, but the information contained in these words caused a shocking wave in the heart of the barbarian patriarch. The battle did indeed break out, and the existence who came to invade is the king of skeletons who shook the entire Anduin continent. Located at the northern end of the continent, the barbarians have not directly suffered the impact of the undead natural disaster, nor have they directly faced the King of Bones. However, just from the fact that the mighty Caesar Empire was crippled by the King of Bones, it is enough to see how terrible the King of Bones is. You must know that it is precisely because of the existence of the northern fortress of the Caesar Empire and the northern core that the entire barbarians are firmly trapped in this land of ice and snow, making it difficult to go south. Caesar's empire was almost crippled by the whole country, not to mention the barbarians now. The King of Bones not only appeared, he also appeared in the sacred place of inheritance of the barbarians, defeated their ancestors, and took away their ancestors. The barbarian patriarch did not know whether he should be happy for the barbarians who successfully escaped the catastrophe and survived from the hands of the King of Bones, or grieve for the fact that his ancestors and patrons were enslaved, and recognize the King of Bones as the master. The undead are irreversible. The undead cannot be cut. That is, if one day the barbarians join the crusade against the undead army, the first thing they will encounter is likely to be the ancestors and patriarchs who have been enslaved. The King of Bones, how strong has it been? Even the almost invincible ancestors in his eyes were defeated and enslaved in such a short time kind of degree. He was dazed and bewildered. Fine. The ancestors are not dead, and the profession of the frozen sword saint can continue to be inherited. Fine. The ancestors have become the subordinates of the King of Bones. With the strength of the ancestors and the feelings of the barbarians, the tribes do not take the initiative to provoke, and the undead natural disaster should not sweep the barbarians. Perhaps Su Mu didn't know what kind of mental journey the current patriarch of the barbarians went through after he left with Mist and many epic undead, but even if he knew, he wouldn't care. After a phase shift, after taking Carola, Mist and many epic undead to leave Doxo Mountain, Su Mu went all the way south, heading towards the northern fortress of Caesar's empire now. The undead boss of the legendary rank, that is, Mist, has been conquered, and he has also obtained an additional skeleton notebook and the 4 notebooks, and the task submitted by the undead player has been completed. Next, naturally, it was his turn to issue quest rewards to players. Perhaps is this the first time that he has appeared in front of players with such a peaceful attitude? The time between Su Mu and the undead player who submitted the quest was the 3rd day. As a big boss, and the ultimate big boss in the future, he naturally won't arrive in advance. So, after leaving the barbarian territory with Carola, Mist, and those epic undead, Su Mu studied the information in the skeleton notebook, while slowly rushing towards the northern frontier. By the time he was about to reach the northern frontier, and it was the 3rd day, Su Mu had already researched the information contained in the skull notes. As long as he obtains the corpse of a legendary hero, he can easily transform it into an epic undead, but there are still shortcomings, and they are not small. The epic undead transformed in batches in this way are basically equivalent to the inferior products in the epic rank. Not to mention that the possibility of advancing again is not high. It is also difficult for the epic undead that have been transformed in batches to maintain their memories, skills and inheritance during their lifetime. If epic undead like Agnes and Carola are real undead bosses, those undeads transformed in batches can only be called epic monsters at best, and are completely unqualified to be called monster bosses. The so-called monster boss not only have the four-dimensional attributes far exceeding the heroes of the same rank, but also the powerful combat power of 477, far exceeding the heroes of the same rank. What are the qualifications of the epic undead that the first 2 or 3 epic heroes can easily deal with to be named as boss? But not bad. At least, the epic level undead transformed in batches can greatly improve the overall quality of the undead army, so that the undead army will not leave the command of the undead boss. It will become a scattered sand. Hurry up and hurry up. When the sky was approaching noon, Sumu and his party were only over 100 kilometers away from the northern fortress of the Caesar Empire, and only over 20 kilometers away from the place agreed with the undead player. Before rushing to Doksushin, Sumu went to step on the spot and recorded the location coordinates of the meeting place, so he simply made a phase shift and took Kerala, Mist and the dozens of epic undead across the last 20 kilometers and appeared directly at the agreed location. The place where Sumu and the undead player agreed is a plain at this time. Except for the few hundred meters around the agreed location coordinates, there are no extra people. Starting from the range of 500 meters, there are 7 players in the mentor rank, and thousands of players in the elite rank waiting. Great enemy. Each of these players clenched their weapons. The physical attack professional is ready to release the skills at any time. The archer's arrow has been on the long. The caster also clenched the staff in his hand, ready to guide the skills at any time. Even outside the alert range of thousands of players, layers of rune traps have been laid out at a high price. Nature. This preparation is not to deal with Sumu. Even if there are hundreds of thousands of players in the game guild of the guild leader who came here, he can't be crazy enough to fight Sumu. Unless these hundreds of thousands of players are legendary players, he will dare to rise the idea. Otherwise, Caesar's empire is a lesson in the past. This preparation, be wary of players from other game guilds. In every game guild, spies from other game guilds are inevitably lurking. When this guild leader named Miantanshu brought his guild's elite here, the news would naturally be known to other game guilds. It is Miantanshu who signed a real-life purchase clue agreement with Fish Without a Heart, and the undead player who submitted the quest also signed a real-life purchase agreement with Miantianchi. So, before the arrival of the King of Bones and the rewards of the quest, the Celestial Master was not afraid of what those game guilds would do. But once you get the reward you want, it may not be enough. A clue of a legendary undead boss involves 1 piece of epic equipment, 2 pieces of dark gold equipment, 10 pieces of gold equipment, and an epic occupation inheritance. At the current stage, the value of these equipment and professional inheritance is immeasurable. Once the reward is obtained, no one can guarantee that those game guilds will not come to snatch it. Actually, even now, a few kilometers away from the coordinates of their location, many players have already appeared. These players, some of them just came to watch the news after they got the news. Some wanted to use this opportunity to contact the King of Bones to see if they could join the undead camp. Some came from the game guilds, who were unsure of their minds. There are thousands of players. No one can guarantee that when the reward is really in hand, will these players swarm to attack him and snatch the reward he got. So, this is the scene in front of me. When he came here, yesterday, the division even prepared the mental preparation for all these elite players to die in battle. The dropped level can still be practiced back. Lost equipment can also be repurchased. As long as he can return to the guild's base camp with the reward smoothly. They will make a lot of money. Time, minute by minute. When it was almost noon, Master Sleeping Tan felt a little nervous in his heart. He doesn't know when the King of Bones will arrive, but the longer it drags on, the more players will come here, and the more disadvantageous it will be to him. Just when the Celestial Master was about to take out the pre-purchased food from his inventory to replenish his hunger, suddenly, a black fog spreads out at the agreed location coordinates. Coming, his right hand trembled slightly. The food he had just taken out fell to the ground, and the Eye Master grabbed the zombie professional player, following him this location. Black mist. Anyone can guess that this is the sign of the appearance of the King of Bones. Slowly, the black mist dissipated. In the area that was deliberately vacated, dozens of figures gradually became clear. Standing in the forefront is naturally the King of Bones, Sumu, the iconic black helmet and black armor, the iconic skeleton sword, the bright ghost that has become a new symbol, have all proved the identity of the King of Skeletons. Behind the King of Bones is a huge skeleton, with a height of more than 2.7 meters, and behind this huge skeleton, there are dozens of equally tall skeletons. Legend. Epic. Master Sleeping Heaven's face was full of horror. Even if he didn't release the exploration technique, he could still feel that the extraordinarily tall and huge skeleton was clearly a legendary undead boss. Those slightly shorter, but equally tall skeletons are at least epic. The King of Bones appears, accompanied by not only an epic rank ghost princess, but also a legendary undead boss, and dozens of epic undead tall undead. Such a fit, should I say. Is it worthy of being the ultimate boss of Anduin continent? Of course, it's not just sloppy. The combination of a King of Bones, with strength above the legend plus a legendary undead boss, plus an epic princess ghost, plus even an epic undead. Just the aura that came out made Master Sleeping and the others feel breathing difficulty. Not to mention, the breath of death and darkness that kept pervading. If the King of Bones hadn't taken the initiative to restrain the diffuse aura of death and darkness, I'm afraid these auras alone would be able to corrode the elite ranks and the players below them to death. Call. He let out a long sigh, and the Celestial Master brought the zombie professional player forward and slowly approached the King of Bones. Then, under his signal, the zombie professional player said with some stumbling, "Joe, Your Excellency the King of Bones, I found the clues of the legendary undead." Seeing the two players cautiously approaching him, Sumu smiled. He understood the player's reaction to the fanfare. For a player from the undead camp to accept a quest reward with a player from the human camp, it was even earlier than he expected because this was what he promoted. After the zombie professional player finished speaking those words, Sumu did not hesitate, and directly opened his quest editing system, ready to issue the quest reward this time. First, it is equipment. Dozens of legendary equipment, hundreds of epic equipment, and more dark gold equipment and gold equipment have been stored in his storage space. Disposable. Sumu selected 5 legendary equipment, 10 epic equipment and 20 dark gold equipment as selections, and put them into the task settlement panel, allowing the zombie professional player to choose freely. Second, is the profession. Sumu only listed 2 options. The first choice, he personally tailored an epic occupation template of the undead camp for this zombie professional player. However, this epic class template will not be released until 3 days later. The second option, immediately get a legendary job template of the human faction. In this choice, Sumu also gave 3 legendary occupation templates, corresponding to physical attack, long-range attack and caster occupation. These 3 professional templates are all the spoils of his killing legendary heroes. After doing all this, Sumu thought about it, and chose to settle the task. Just as Sumu gave the reward for the task settlement, the corresponding options also appeared in front of the zombie professional player. Equipment options. He can choose 1 legendary equipment, 2 epic equipment and 10 dark gold equipment for 5.5. And in the settlement window that appeared in front of him, he could clearly see the attributes of each piece of equipment: legendary gear, epic gear, dark gold equipment. When he saw the series of equipment flashing in various colors, the professional zombie player was left with drool. He's just an elite player. The best piece of equipment on his body is nothing but silver quality equipment. Compared with these high-level equipment, his silver quality equipment, no matter in appearance or attributes, is just as rubbish as sheet, etc. Why is there legendary equipment? Didn't I complete the second main quest? The zombie professional player who reacted suddenly widened his eyes. He opened his taskbar as quickly as possible at this time. His taskbar is clearly marked. He has completed and is clearing the task of reward, not just the task of finding clues to the legendary undead. Instead, he has completed the 2 tasks of finding the Book of the Undead and finding the legendary undead. F***K. President, US. We're getting big. That's right. What Sumu settles is not epic equipment, but legendary equipment, nor does he settle epic job templates, but legendary job templates. It stands to reason, the player submits only the task of finding the clues of the legendary undead, and he should get epic equipment, customized lore job template or human epic job template. Skull notes, discovered by Sumu himself during the process of enslaving Mist. According to the rules of the game, he does not need to issue this part of the reward, but the result. Sumu not only distributed the rewards for the task of finding the Book of the Undead, but also combined the rewards of the 2 tasks directly, raising a level. The reward for the final settlement of this mission is more than 10 times larger than before. Why do this? Or, why not do this? You know, Suma's purpose is to find the undead notes, and find the whereabouts of the legendary undead. Whether it is legendary equipment, epic equipment, or those legendary job templates, epic job templates, all are useless things for Sumu. What is really useful to him are the players of the undead camp, and all the players in the entire Anduin continent. He is not those high-level NPCs of the human camp. He is a monster boss. He took the initiative to expose the information found in the Skull Notebook, and merged the two quests to increase the rank of the quest reward. What he lost was nothing useful to him, but what he gained was the entire Anduin continent. All players' madness, as you can imagine. When the rewards for the settlement of this mission are revealed, how many players will be amazed by the entire Anduin Land 01, and how many players will be searching for the remaining Death Note and legendary undead? This is the result he wants. So, there is the following scene. What's getting bigger? Hurry up and exchange rewards according to our previously scheduled plan. The sleeping master was a little impatient, staying beside the King of Bones, surrounded by so many undead bosses. He was under a lot of pressure, coupled with the tens of thousands of players in the distance. He just wants to redeem the reward as soon as possible, get the part he deserves, and then return to his guild's base camp as soon as possible. The ink blot of the zombie pros annoyed him. 15. Legend. It's a legend. The zombie professional players were a bit incoherent, and they reckoned that they had completed 2 tasks instead of 1, and even the rewards of the 2 tasks were directly merged, and the news of the first order promotion was told to the heavenly sleeping master. This time, became a master sleeper, excited to play around. As the president of a large game guild with more than 100,000 members, Tianchi Tian is not only a top player himself, but his understanding of the game world exceeds that of most people. The resources contained in Second World are beyond everyone's imagination. As time goes by, more and more people will join this world, and this game world will become the second world for everyone in the real world. In such a world, what are the benefits? In such a world, how much benefit does it represent to get the first piece of legendary equipment, the first legendary occupation, and the first pot of gold, in this huge and real world? In an instant, Master Sleeping thought a lot. At this time, the zombie professional player also reacted. He and Mian Tianchi signed an agreement with legal benefits in reality, but they signed an agreement for the task of finding clues to the legendary undead. Now, they accomplished 2 tasks. The rewards obtained are also completely different from those in the agreement at time. The zombie professional player's thoughts also followed. 1 piece of legendary equipment, 2 pieces of epic equipment, 10 pieces of dark gold equipment, a player-exclusive epic job template created by the King of Bones, or a legendary job template for the human camp. Both of these rewards can't have his share? Zombie pros felt their hearts pounding when the idea came to mind. He swallowed, not in a hurry to choose the reward, but said cautiously, "President, the agreement we signed is different from the current situation." Master Sleeping frowned. As a human being, he naturally understands what this zombie professional player means. He wasn't angry, not even angry. After a slight pause, Tianchi Yan said decisively, "You can share one of the 10 dark gold equipment, and you will choose one first. The original promised gold equipment will not be cancelled. In addition, your reward will be from 200,000 yuan up to 2 million, a piece of gold equipment, plus a reward of 200,000. This is the reward that this zombie professional player can get after assisting Master Sleeper to complete this mission in the agreement signed in reality. Compared to the work he did, this kind of reward is already extremely rich. If it wasn't for the guild where Master Sleeping was, among the players who knew the truth, he was the only one who was lucky enough to join the undead camp, and this simple and rich reward would not be his turn. And now, the original gold equipment is still there, and there is another dark gold equipment. His reward for completing this task has also changed from 200,000 directly to 2 million. Zombie professional players gradually calmed down. A large gaming guild with more than 100,000 members is the top in the entire gaming world. The background of such a game guild in the real world is even more unfathomable. He can be greedy, he can raise prices, he can take the opportunity to demand higher treatment, but he cannot be greedy. As long as it is within a reasonable range, Tianchi Mian will not refuse, but once it exceeds a certain limit, I'm afraid he will be in big trouble in the real world. A piece of yellow turban equipment and a piece of dark gold equipment have already given him an advantage in the home of the undead camp. The reward of 2 million is a wealth that he cannot earn in his life. Thinking more and more calmly, the zombie professional player took a deep breath and said, "I believe that the president will not break his promise. This is the detailed information of the equipment and legendary occupation. Please choose it yourself." Having said that, the zombie professional player directly sent the screenshots of the pieces of equipment and several legendary professional templates to Master Sleeping Heaven. The heavenly sleeping master took a deep look at the zombie professional player, quickly browsed through the equipment and legendary professional templates, and decided on the reward for this mission as quickly as possible. Greed, anyone can have it. Even he couldn't help being excited because of the value of this reward, let alone an ordinary player. He is not afraid of the greed of zombie professional players. As long as there is a degree, as long as he can successfully obtain a piece of dark gold equipment, and 2 million cash as a reward for this mission, he will pay if he pays. and he does not take these to heart. Legendary equipment. The Celestial Master chose a prop because it is the only one of all the legendary equipment listed by the King of Bones, the only one that he can use now, and has always been able to use the legendary rank epic equipment. He chose a long sword and a tower shield, corresponding to the 2 mentor level players under his command. The dark gold equipment, in addition to choosing a staff and a robe for himself. The rest are also selected according to the needs of the mentor level players in the guild. Finally, profession, and it's a legendary job. After careful research, the Eye Master chose Elemental Mentor as his future legendary career template. There is only a legendary career template, there is no previous career template. He is not afraid. The big deal is that his next hero progression and epic progression are all moving in the direction of Elemental Mentor, and finally they will be seamlessly connected. What he doesn't know is the profession of Element Mentor comes from the Caesar Empire. This legendary mage profession originally belonged to the chief archmage of the Caesar Empire, Elmer. Even in the collection of the Caesar Empire, this profession is also one of the top legendary professions. Wait until Master Sleeping Heaven has finished choosing. The zombie professional player made a choice on the task settlement panel in accordance with the plan of the Celestial Master. Subsequently, the equipment and class templates all appear in his inventory. In order to prevent himself from being greedy, professional zombie players dare not even look at them, and directly trade those rewarded equipment and professional templates to Master Sleeping Heaven. Only one of his own remains mission completed. Sumu also has no reason to stay here. He smiled slightly, and the black mist spread out. After the fog filled with the breath of death and darkness gradually dissipated, Sumu, Carola, Mist, and the figures of dozens of epic undead had disappeared. Only the player remains. The equipment and legendary occupation templates appeared in his 480 inventory, and both Tianchi breathed a sigh of relief. He could imagine, with the help of these equipments, the next development speed of my guild will be unparalleled. With that legendary occupation template, how high-spirited my future self should be. But now is not the time to relax. He took out an extremely expensive teleportation scroll from the inventory, and Tianchi quickly explained to several mentor-level players, who had already walked over, chasing the dream, transfer 2 million to the account of Cold Moon. This is the reward I promised him. In addition, transfer 8 million to the account of the fish without heart. In a few seconds, these words were explained, before the most elite players under his command had reacted, and before the tens of thousands of onlookers in the distance had not reacted. The Celestial Master had already tore the teleportation scroll in his hand. A slight fluctuation of magic power spreads out. Master Mian's figure flickered slightly before disappearing in place. Dream Chasing is the player who is in charge of property under Master Mianton, and is also his friend and partner in reality. Cold Moon is the professional zombie player. Fish Without Heart is naturally the only one. The barbarian player is also the one who sells the information and location of Mist, 2,800,000W. Chasing Dreams is a bit confusing. The 2 million, given to the Cold Moon, he can still understand. It may be that the Cold Moon has temporarily increased the price. As long as Master Sleeping Heaven agreed, as long as the reward that should be handed to him is in hand, he is too lazy to pay attention to it. 182,800. He remembered that in the agreement they signed with Heartless Fish, as long as the clues were true, as long as the King of Bones really settled the quest rewards, they would pay him 3 million, which is also the price that their guild offered a bounty on the official forum of Second World, how etc. 800. 3 million, 5 million, fuck, isn't it what I thought? Seemingly figured out something, the Dream Chasing eyes suddenly widened, and his face was full of shock and inconceivable. 3 million, a clue to the location of the legendary undead. 5 million, which is a clue about the Book of the Dead. He didn't know that the rewards of the two quests had been merged by Sumu, and it was directly promoted to a rank of Dream Chasing. The only thing he could think of was that they completed 2 quests, not 1. Otherwise, why did the 3 million cash that should have been transferred to the Heartless Fish suddenly turned into 8 million? Book of the Dead, legendary undead. Hey, for a while, Dream Chasing also showed signs of developing in the direction of dementia soon. Several other players at the mentor level and players at the elite level also gathered around. After learning his guess from Mung Chasing's mouth, these core players were also overjoyed. As the guild became stronger, their treatment was naturally higher. More importantly, the character and vision of their guild leader, the rewards exchanged this time must have a share of the core players of their guild. No one dares to think about the career template. This is definitely the president. They didn't dare to think too much about epic equipment. The guild leader must be thinking about equipment that is conducive to the development of the guild. But dark gold equipment is hero equipment. It is the NPC hero in the game world, and not everyone has dark gold equipment in hand. The dark gold equipment and gold equipment with the largest number must have their share. A time, they didn't even care about the tens of thousands of houses that gradually gathered around. Anyway, the guild leader has already left and returned to their guild's base camp with the reward. It's a big deal for them to die at this time. Among the few core players who came together, a thief with only an elite rank rolled his eyes and whispered, "Brother, the agreement we signed with the Heartless Fish is 3 million, since what he sold was only the clues of the legendary undead. Is it the 5 million? Snapped. Before the elite thief could finish speaking, Dream Chaser slapped him in the face and said coldly, "When will it be your turn to question the decision made by the boss? What you see is only the 5 million, but what the boss sees is the reputation and development of the entire guild. Is the boss missing the 5 million? Is Laozi missing the 5 million? If it weren't for your sister's plea, do you think you were qualified to join the guild's elite team? Then Bibi, where did you go to Laozi?" Your sister doesn't dare to say anything more. Glancing coldly at the elite thief, who shrank his head in his head, he cursed at dream chasing. They are gaming guilds, and it is one of the largest gaming guilds in the entire gaming world. They are not short of money, and they do not need to do such small actions. When it comes to the size of the Bright Summit Game Guild, being upright and upright is the way they should behave, at least under the leadership of Master Sleeping Heaven. The Bright Summit Game Guild has always done this, contrary to what Master Sleeping Heaven had expected. It is also different from the expectations of the core players of the Bright Summit Guild. After completing this mission, the players who were watching from a distance did not rush up to fight. Even the members of other game guilds, who were hidden among the watching players, they watched helplessly as Master Sleeping ripped open the teleportation scroll and left here. The core players of the Bright Summit Guild, who were even more cold-eyed, slowly retreated with the elite battle group, rushing towards the North Fortress, without any intention of doing anything. 1 epic job template, 1 epic equipment, 2 dark gold equipment and 10 golden equipment. This is already a huge wealth, but not enough to get them to do it. Or, the Bright Summit Guild has already made all preparations, and even if they all join in the looting of the loot, it is very likely that the relationship with the Bright Summit Guild will only deteriorate, and no benefits will be obtained. They came here to see with their own eyes whether the final boss of the Anduin continent, King of Bones quest settlement would proceed normally. If the quest rewards this time are really in hand. Next, every game guild will do its best to find clues to the Book of the Undead and the Legendary Undead. Their goal is not only epic occupation templates and epic equipment, but also the legendary occupation templates and legendary equipment represented by the 4 Books of the Dead. Of course, this is when they are far away from the scene, unaware that the rewards have been merged in advance. If you know that what the Bright Summit Guild won this time is not epic occupation templates and epic equipment, but legendary occupation templates and legendary equipment, even if it is very likely that they will not get anything, they will also go to war. Grab that tiny chance of getting a job template and gear. A phase shift directly took Carola, Mist, and the dozens of epic undead across a distance of hundreds of kilometers, and also crossed the northern frontier, and appeared in the territory of Caesar's empire. Suma's face appeared, a smile. Bright Summit Game Guild. He still has a general understanding of this game guild. In the past life, this game guild was one of the top 10 super game guilds in the future, with the Anduin continent as the base camp. The Bright Summit Game Guild's sphere of influence spans several game worlds, and the number of official members exceeds 500,000. Of course, just the number of people is not the reason why Sumu remembers this game guild. What impressed Sumu most in this game guild was their guild Eternal Sleeping Celestial Master. His own strength is strong, and can be called the top group of players among the players. As the president of the game guild, both the Heavenly Master's behavior is more upright and mature, coupled with his deep understanding and strategic vision of the game world. In the next few years, he will continue to be a top player, and the president of the game guild until the gods awaken, and he has always been a star-like figure in the game world. The appearance of Frozen Moon and Heavenly Sleeping Master was just a coincidence, not a deliberate choice made by Sumu, but to the greatest extent possible to help Sumu achieve his goal. With Myeontianch's behavior and strategic vision, the next Bright Summit Game Guild will have a peak period of rapid development and growth, while real-world gaming forums. There will be a new round of storms, just a legendary job template, and a few pieces of equipment that he doesn't need. Sumu has moved the players in the entire Anduin continent presumably. After the details of this quest reward are revealed, will other game guilds and all players in the Anduin continent go crazy? With this almost trivial effort, Sumu has persuaded players from the entire Anduin continent to serve him. From beginning to end, Sumu had no idea of swallowing the entire Anduin continent, or, before opening a new continent and raising his eyes from the main material world of Anduin continent to more main material worlds, he will not really set off the undead natural disaster and devour the entire continent. Even the speed of expanding the undead camp will slow down, not to mention how long it takes to devour the entire Anduin continent. Devouring the entire Anduin continent and transforming the entire Anduin continent into undead. How do the players of the undead camp develop? How to improve their strength? If the player's strength in the undead camp cannot be improved, how should he harvest leaks and experience points? Sustainable development. This is the tone Sumu set for the undead camp. When will he have the ability and qualifications to go out of the Anduin continent and expand the hunting target from this one material world to several, dozens, or even all the main material worlds perhaps? Could Anduin continent be his base? With a contented smile on his face, Sumu continued to move forward with his subordinates, rushing in the direction of Caesar's capital. Next, he just had to wait. Waiting for the fermentation of this mission, waiting for the madness of the countless players, waiting for the millions of players to spontaneously submit the clues they need to themselves, and let them go to harvest the fruits. By the way, turn the capital of Caesar into a new city of the dead. Now, he has this strength and this time. After returning to his base camp, Master Zhang Tian heaved a sigh of relief. Before he could explain the process and detailed rewards of this mission to his subordinates, Master Sleeping Tian locked himself in a room for the first time, after returning to his guild's base camp. Then, his hands trembled slightly as he placed the rewards from this mission one by one. A piece of legendary equipment, directly recognized the master. 2 pieces of epic equipment, set aside for now. 10 pieces of dark gold equipment were also put aside finally. Legendary occupation template, element tutor. DTI11, you have obtained the transfer information of the legendary occupation template, elemental instructor. You have not met the relevant requirements for transferring to legendary occupation, elemental mentor. You can choose to bind the job template yourself, or unbind it to restore the job template to its original state. When a light emitting a soft glow appeared in his hand, a system prompt sounded in the mind of the Celestial Master. Overjoyed, Master Sleeping chose to bind without hesitation. After completing this process, he let out a long sigh of relief. After the occupation template in the initial state is bound by him, it becomes a piece of information on his money's attribute panel. Can't be dropped, can't be stolen, and can't be traded again. That is to say, unless he actively deletes his account, no one can take away this legendary career template. Legendary equipment and epic equipment can be recognized as masters, but after being killed, there is still a possibility of falling, but the probability is extremely low. Legendary career template, but there is no such possibility. Once bound, no one can take it away. The most precious professional template has become his property, and even the Celestial Master is finally relieved. He opened the door, looking at the many elite players waiting outside the door. He said in high spirits, prepare. When the vice chairman returns, the president will announce a big event, not just within the game. One day later, a professionally edited post appeared on the official forum of Second World. Bright Summit. The Game Guild directly announced its own Game Guild's harvest, this time in the most domineering way, and also announced the next development direction of its own Game Guild. Post sent. After just 1 or 2 hours of fermentation, it once again detonated the enthusiasm of all players. The entire game world, a whole 20 server continents. The first legendary equipment comes out. The first and second epic equipment comes out. The first to 9th dark gold equipment comes out. The first legendary career template is out. And all this, all in the Bright Summit Game Guild.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.